Welcome to Project Play. I'm Kaye England with Wilmington Prints, and in today's video, we're going to share some wonderful pre-cuts called Old Glory and a fabulous pattern called Vortex. Let's get busy. Well, welcome to all of our patchwork friends throughout the country. Our goal is to make you aware of how Wilmington Prints calls their pre-cuts, how they're named, and we'll be sharing a variety of great projects which are really good for beginner all the way up to advanced. Some wonderful little tips about execution of the project, how they collaborate on packaging these. So first of all, let's take a look at the package we will be working with called Old Glory. Now, many of you who sew, I'm sure, have a room full of pre-cut packaged items. The one thing that I think sets Wilmington's apart a little bit is how they have branded their pre-cuts. They call everything that has been cut, like a 2.5-inch strip, a 5-inch square, a 10-inch square, they call them carats. Now, carats, my friend, are sizes. That's a carat, that's a carat, meaning it's a size. So instead of saying 2.5-inch strips or whatever right there, we're just saying if it says carat, it has been pre-cut. So today I am working with 2.5-inch carat gems. And gem is the term that we use for all of Wilmington's essentials. And that is a library of approximately 500 pieces of go-withs, things you need to complete your projects, fillers, textures, that sort of thing. So if you see something that says 40, and it will say carat, and it will say gems, that tells me that I am looking at 42.5-inch strips of Wilmington's essential patterns. Now, as we move along, we may work with some 5-inch squares and some 10-inch squares. But today, all we're going to be talking about is the fact that we have carats and gems. And gems are just sparkly things, my friends. So as we look at this project, I have not had this quilt quilted yet because there's just not been enough hours in the day. In the future, I will share this with you when it is quilted. But let's take a look at how this project is built. Now, the Pattern Vortex has optional settings so you can create something different once you have your Old Glory pre-cut pack and or another color range you might have chosen from your retailer. You have a different way of setting it. I have used the setting for the Vortex pattern right here. As you open your pattern, it is going to tell you that you have A and B, and those would be, in this case, your red and your blue. You have a choice of where you position that red and blue, and just to be a little different, I chose a different one than where the red is in the picture, because I want you to know that you have lots of choices when you're creating one of these patterns. And I'm not going to cut and or sew on camera today for this video because I believe it's so simple that you won't need me to. So as we look in our overhead, you're seeing that what we're cutting from our 2.5-inch strips is we're going to be working with 2.5-inch squares. Every one of these little ones are 2.5-inch squares. And then we rotate our other sizes. So this is your block, my friends. This is all you have to do. So you're going to go so, and bingo, here's our block. Now, I'm going to look at this block as I'm looking at it like I'm going to start. So depending on where you position this, when you lay these out, will determine whether you have that red in that vortex, that little center of that tornado, for example, if you have the red there or the blue there. So the way you orient your very first piece on the wall is going to be the decision of which one of those colors. In my case, I put the red in that center. So once you make all of these, what's so much fun about it? You get them all cut. Now let's take a look at how I organize all of my work in the beginning. I have assembled my cream, my red, and my blue. And I have followed what it asked me to do, and I have pulled my creams out. I'm going to have some leftover, and our second shot shows you some leftover reds and blues, and we'll play with those a little bit later. And then it asked me to set aside some of my creams so that I have those for my binding. And then look at this mess I have on my table, but this is how I roll, friends. And one of the things that I learned playing with this little project is that if you assemble all of your rows, and remember, if we go back and look at that little shot, I have 5 rows. If you build all of those and make your elements, then when you come in, you'll start to see, okay, I got X number of blue, X number of red, and do I care if a same pattern touches the next one? I didn't, and you can see my mess. You can also see the great view I have out my sewing room window. And then you see our layout that I just showed you, which tells me if I don't like the way the third one in that row looks, I'll go over and reach into that stack and grab myself another one. And then there's all of mine organized on my sewing table. Now, if you don't have that much space on your sewing table, use the floor or bring in another chair or something, because you can see once they're all built how easy it was for me to come up with the final plan, which is the block. And there's the shot of exactly how I got started on this. Everybody wants to know, how do you press the block? Okay. Well, let's turn this block over and take a look. Now, you have a choice of which way you press, whether you press everything to the red or everything to the blue. Whatever you do, be consistent. And of course, I pressed always light to dark, light to dark, light to dark, light to dark, light to dark. So be consistent about that. And because of the nature of the way this pattern is built, you are going to come across where this seam touches its neighbor that would be living right there. And, well, let's just build something right here. So let's just say it looks like that, and these two are going to be going the same way. When that happens, I'm telling you, I just take a pair of scissors and nip that so that I can pull it back the right way. If you don't do that, here's your choice. Press every seam open. And I avoid that when I can on a simple project like this. I do not believe there is any harm at all in just clipping that so that you can press those when block 1 touches block 2 and that sort of thing. Now, once you've got all of these, you can see the first quilt that I'm going to share with you on the wall is not, I'm still missing a bottom row, but is the pattern that I actually ultimately sewed. But let's say you were getting adventuresome that day and you look at the second one. Look at what I can do there. I can create blue and red circles, if you will, with the cream kind of drifting around it. I love that one. And then, well, I can just do something in a log cabin style, which is like fields and furrows, and that's really fun. Well, there it is going another direction. So you can see how easy it would be to create 3 or 4 or 5 different quilts. And if there's any of you that are involved in the Quilts of Valor program, this is a marvelous quilt to do for that project. So let's just say you love working on the Quilts of Valor program. All you'd have to do is just to sort different of the pre-packs, and you'd be able to create each one of those settings if you chose to. You really are wise to assemble in rows from top left to right, or if you like to work right to left. Be consistent. So I'm building my rows and I'm sewing left to right, left to right, left to right. Now the pattern does not call for a border on this quilt. It just calls for a binding. So I set aside my creams for the binding, but let's just say you're sitting on a fabulous Wilmington print that you just love the way it looks on here. I would highly encourage you to border it if you want it to be a little bit larger. And all you have to do then, sew it, get it quilted, and you've got a fabulous project. Now, after I finished the quilt, I realized that in this particular pattern, I had a few extra red and blue and cream strips that I didn't need in the project. Now, you could, of course, decide to make more blocks. Just be careful and do your calculation based on what you have in your carrot cuts. I created this cute little checkerboard. I've made a jillion of these, and I'm telling you, there's got to be somebody in your life that'd love to have a checkerboard. If you don't want a checkerboard, it's just a wonderful little wall project. I do not have a pattern. You don't need a pattern, my friends. What you need to do is just make a bunch of 4 patches. Now, you might do red and cream, or you might do blue and cream. If you have enough pieces, you could do red and blue. This is what I chose. So you're in charge of what you do. So let's take a look at it. First thing you're going to do is use 2.5-inch squares, and you're going to make a 4-patch. So you know what a simple 4-patch looks like. Then I build larger units. So I sew 4 patches together. Now I'm down to just 4 big squares. Then I sew those together, and bingo, I have my great little project. Now, I did a little playing around, and I had enough of the red to throw a little binding around it. And there's little triangles in the corner. Now, any of you that make triangles know that there's a bunch of ways to get these done. You could just simply lay a red square and a blue square together and sew across the diagonal, and you've made them. Or if you work with specialty rulers, or however you get the job done. And it could just be a plain blue border or a plain red border. So not only did you get yourself a wonderful patriotic quilt, you now have a go-with little checkerboard out of the remainder of your carrots as your packaging. We hope that this has inspired you to play with the pre-cuts that you currently own, or get yourself some more. So you will be looking for 40 carrot gems. That's how this project was built. So hopefully today you can see we tried to do all things patriotic. My friends, I even dress patriotic. Red, white, blue, all of that. We hope that this quilt inspires you to do a lot of sewing with the Wilmington Prints, and we look forward to seeing you on a future video. Have a great day. Bye-bye.